4:29 a.m. Denver was still cloaked in darkness, the streetlights casting a dim golden glow on roads still damp with dew. In a narrow alley leading out to Broadway Avenue, a thin figure in an old blue coat was walking briskly, clutching a canvas bag, eyes fixed on the bakery that glowed softly in the dark. Mila Grant, 34, paused in front of the glass door of Sunrise Hearth. She pulled off her knitted gloves, pressing her palms against the cold glass, peering inside where the wall clock read 4:30. The warm yellow light illuminated her face, revealing dark circles under her eyes and the faint lines at the corners. Though she was still young, in that moment, Mila closed her eyes, breathing in the faint scent of flower that clung to her coat, listening quietly to her heartbeat, and whispered softly, "As long as I can still stand, I won't give up. Not today." She pushed open the door, the small bell chiming softly. The bakery remained silent, with only the yellow lights and the lingering scent of flour and butter left from the day before. Mila washed her hands thoroughly, tied her worn grey apron back around her waist, smoothing out a small wrinkle at the edge like a ritual to begin the new day. People believed the bakery opened at 6, but for Mila, the workday always began before dawn, when the dough was still rising, when the butter was still cold enough to fold into each layer, and when the streets outside were still half asleep. On an old wooden shelf, a faded photo was taped with yellowing tape, a young man smiling brightly next to a small oven, holding a golden brown loaf of bread in his hands, eyes sparkling. Evan Grant, Mila's older brother, who had left this world 7 years ago on a stormy night along the highway. Mila touched the edge of the photo gently, as if afraid to tear it. A glint of tears flickered in her eyes, but she quickly turned away, beginning to gather ingredients, weighing flour, weighing butter, weighing sugar. Each movement was precise, silent, and so meticulous that the air in the bakery seemed to slow down with her every breath. She never spoke to her co-workers about Evan. No one knew that the sourdough recipe sold throughout the bakery, the one that brought customers lining up every morning, was actually her brother's unfinished dream. A man who died with a debt hanging over his shoulders. Each morning, arriving before her shift, Mila would knead the dough by herself, fold butter into the layers, watch the oven's temperature, time the dough's resting periods. During those moments waiting for the yeast to rise, she would look up at the clock, listen to the ticking of the oven, close her eyes, and listen to her own breathing. Today, I'm still breathing, still paying off that debt. In the kitchen's corner, her old phone buzzed lightly with a bank message. Monthly debt payment has been deducted. Mila let out a faint smile, a smile that was neither happy nor sad. She deleted the message, set the phone down, and continued working with the dough. Outside, the sky began to reveal a pale grey streak against the dark blue-black canvas. A new morning in Denver was beginning, with a woman quietly carrying a debt that wasn't even hers. Inside a warm bakery filled with memories that couldn't be named aloud. The oven made small crackling sounds in the quiet bakery. The scent of melting butter mingled with the soft tang of rising yeast, creating a fragrance one could only catch when the city was still asleep. Mila Grant was folding cold butter into croissant dough, her hands moving swiftly yet precisely, like a silent dancer. She placed each piece of dough onto trays, aligning them neatly in a practiced habit that needed no looking. On the wall clock, the hands pointed to 4:58 a.m. In a shadowy corner near the back door, a man in an old khaki jacket, wearing a black baseball cap, quietly observed. Owen Miller, 42, CEO of Harvest and Hearth. But today, he was just Noah, a trainee sent from headquarters to learn the process. He had been watching Mila since the moment she stepped into the shop, seeing how she wiped down each counter, adjusted the oven's temperature even when no one else would notice, and how she took a deep breath before beginning her work. No one had asked her to do those things. She didn't need to arrive so early, but she did. He noted in his small notebook, she works as if she's trying to hold something together before it falls apart. At 5:15 a.m., a young man named Tyler rushed in, out of breath, apologizing for being late. Mila didn't scold him. She just smiled softly. "Wash your hands. There's still time." Her smile was fleeting, vanishing as quickly as smoke before her face returned to calm. Tyler accidentally dropped a tray of freshly kneaded dough, flour scattering across the floor. He panicked, bending down, hands trembling with fear. Before the manager could come over, Mila was already kneeling, carefully gathering what dough could be saved. "Bread can fall, but you can't," she said softly, her voice oddly calm. Tyler looked up, eyes brimming with tears, muttering, "I'm sorry." Mila didn't look at him, only continued picking up the dough, placing it in the bin, cleaning the floor, then stood up, dusted off her hands, and returned to her work. Owen watched, a look of surprise in his eyes. That wasn't how an hourly employee typically reacted. That was the way of someone living through every working minute. By 6 o'clock, the pastry counter lights flickered on, and the first customers trickled in. Mila's first trays of croissants were brought out, still hot, buttery aromas filling the air, making customers lean in to take a deep breath before smiling. They had no idea who had made them, or that the person hadn't slept the night before, or that those hands had been trembling with cold in the misty morning. Owen helped place the pastries on display, his hands clumsy, intentionally presenting himself as a rookie. His eyes never left Mila as she wiped down the flour-dusted counters, checked the oven's heat again, and quietly stepped back to watch the now filled pastry counter. As customers came and went, Owen pulled up a chair near the oven, sitting down with a sigh, watching Mila from afar. In his mind, he heard his father's words from years ago. If you want to understand a company, you have to understand each person behind the product. Before coming here, Owen only saw the numbers on reports Denver branch, low profit margins, steady customer flow, consistent repeat customers. He once thought about changing the staff, cutting costs, but now, watching customers leave with Mila's croissants, smiling as they ate, returning to buy more, Owen realized that numbers never told the whole story. At 7 a.m., when the first wave of customers thinned out, Owen watched Mila wipe her hands, look up, and let out a quiet sigh. The morning light now shone through the glass, casting Mila's shadow on the tiled floor, her back slightly hunched with fatigue, but her face glowing, her eyes looking at the full pastry display like it was a precious achievement. Owen saw that look clearly, a mixture of pride and a loneliness too deep to name. In that moment, Owen realized this woman is living each day for something far more important than just a job. He wondered, why was she pushing herself so hard? What was she running from? Or what was she trying so hard to hold on to? The morning in Denver grew livelier. Bus sounds and car horns echoing through the bakery's glass windows, blending with the laughter of customers holding warm croissants. Mila stood behind the counter, counting trays, her eyes scanning each sourdough loaf, each almond pastry, as if checking their survival. Each pastry that left the counter made her eyes flicker slightly, but her face remained calm. At the corner, Owen pretended to wipe down the glass, fumbling, accidentally brushing against a half-finished coffee cup, quickly pulling his hand back with an apologetic smile. The customer laughed, having no idea that the awkward man was actually the CEO of Harvest and Hearth, quietly observing every detail. Owen glanced at Mila. She didn't chat with customers, only watched quietly from a distance, stepping out to restock pastries, retreating to the back when customers left, sometimes. As she watched customers leave with the pastries, her gaze would pause briefly, her lips moving with words that never formed. Is she apologizing or saying goodbye to each pastry, Owen wondered. Around 9 a.m., the bakery entered its mid-morning lull. Mila wiped her hands, grabbed her water bottle, leaning against the wall, taking a sip while looking out the glass door. Sunlight fell on her face, revealing the deep exhaustion etched beneath her dark brown eyes. In that moment, her gaze drifted, as if seeing a place far away, a place filled with pain, a place Owen could never see. He walked over, using the excuse to ask, "How do you fold the dough so evenly? I've tried so many times and still can't get it right." Mila startled, turning, her eyes wide for a moment before settling back into calm. She nodded slightly, her voice raspy from hours of silence. "You have to feel its elasticity. Don't force it to follow you. Let it guide your hands." Owen chuckled. "Sounds like a philosophy. Bread is like people. Push it too hard and it tears. Abandon it and it deflates." Mila replied, looking at Owen but not truly seeing him. Another employee, Kara, rushed over, excitement in her voice. "Mila, the pastries you made sold out before 9 today. Did you see how happy the customers were?" Mila gave a soft, fleeting smile, nodding before turning away. Kara continued, "They asked for your name, wanted to meet the baker, but I told them you were busy." Mila stopped, her shoulders trembling slightly. For a brief moment, Owen saw fear in her eyes, a fear of being noticed, of being seen. After Kara left, Owen asked quietly, "You don't like customers knowing who you are?" Mila was silent for a while, her hands gripping the water bottle until her knuckles turned white. "I don't bake to be known," she said slowly. I bake because I need to. Owen was about to ask, need what? But the look in Mila's eyes stopped him. By noon, during the lunch break. Mila sat alone in the kitchen corner, eating a dry piece of bread with a slice of cheap cheese, checking her phone as she ate. The screen flashed a notification, debt payment successful. Mila turned off the screen, tucked the phone away, swallowed the dry bite with difficulty, her eyes glancing up at the clock on the wall. 12 days left, she whispered under her breath, then took a sip of water. Owen stood from a distance, his hand gripping the notebook tightly. He had seen many hard-working employees, but he had never seen anyone work with such quiet desperation. He turned away, the report line echoing in his mind, labor costs too high, need to reduce. And for the first time, Owen felt the numbers in those reports become meaningless as he watched a woman eat her lunch quietly beside the oven. Flour streaks still on her face she hadn't yet washed off, simply because she needed to survive, to exist, to pay off a debt he did not yet understand. The air grew heavy. She was still a slender woman, wearing an old apron, with calloused hands and deep eyes. But Mila didn't know that every action she made was leaving a mark on the man pretending to be a trainee. And Owen didn't know that on that day, as he quietly watched Mila standing in the scent of flour and butter, he would no longer be a CEO who only cared about the revenue sheet. That afternoon, a light rain fell over Denver, tiny droplets collecting on the bakery's glass windows, glistening under the warm yellow lights. The scent of freshly baked bread still lingered in the air, but the shop had begun to empty out. Mila stood behind the counter, wiping down the trays, arranging each metal mold back on the shelf, wiping and re-wiping flour marks that had long been cleaned. Her hands trembled slightly, but her eyes stayed fixed on the clock on the wall, where the minute hand slowly approached the 6. In the corner of the shop, Owen, still under the guise of Noah, was cleaning up leftover trays, but his eyes never left Mila. He had seen her work the morning shift, and now saw her quietly taking on the evening shift too, doing the jobs no one else wanted to touch, scrubbing the oven, taking out the trash, mopping the floors, dragging heavy flour sacks from the storage to the counter. At 7:15 p.m., a night shift worker named Miguel approached, holding the new shift schedule. "Mila, you're taking the morning shift again tomorrow?" Miguel asked, worry in his voice. "Yeah," Mila replied, eyes not leaving the towel she was using to clean. "You've been working straight for 3 weeks now. You need to take a day off." Mila gave a tired but firm smile. "A day off doesn't pay the bills." Miguel was about to say more, but looking into Mila's eyes, he sighed and turned away. Owen stood silently, gripping the tray tightly, his eyes following Mila. Her words echoed in his mind. A day off doesn't pay the bills. He remembered the numbers he had read the night before. Mila's wages were below industry average. She didn't receive bonuses, no overtime pay, no holiday bonuses. So why did she keep working herself to exhaustion from dawn until late at night, day after day? By 8:30 p.m., the shop closed. Mila was still sweeping the kitchen, gathering trash, scrubbing the floor. Owen lingered, helping her drag the remaining flour sacks into the storage. When everything was done, Mila sat down on the steps leading to the back door, took off her shoes, massaging her calloused feet. She opened her phone, the light illuminating her tired face, her eyes scanning the screen quickly before stopping on a line of text, remaining debt $12,450. Mila let out a heavy breath, leaned her head back against the wall, closed her eyes as rain dripped down from the edge of the roof, falling into her hair, mixing with the sweat still clinging to her skin. Owen quietly stepped closer, bent down, and asked softly, "Are you okay?" Mila opened her eyes, seeing Owen, a hint of surprise crossing her face before she gave a faint smile and shook her head. "I'm okay," but her voice was hoarse, and her red eyes betrayed those words. You work this much? Is it to pay off debt?" Owen asked, the words slipping out. Mila turned away, silent, her hands gripping the edge of her phone until her knuckles turned white. After a long pause, she finally spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "My brother. He took out a large loan to save our family's bakery before he died." She paused, taking a deep breath, eyes looking down at the ground. "I'm the only one left. I have to pay off his debt." In that moment, Owen saw a frail woman with calloused hands, shouldering the weight of a promise to someone who was no longer here. She wasn't living for herself. She was living to pay off a debt to a memory, to a dream that had been extinguished. He clenched the small notebook in his pocket, his heart twisting. On her way home, Mila pedaled her old bicycle, the back wheels squeaking with each turn, rolling through rain-soaked streets. Every time she stopped at a red light, she would lower her head, take a deep breath, then lift it again and continue pedaling. She didn't know that Owen was quietly driving behind her, keeping his distance, watching each slight stumble when her wheel hit a pothole, each time Mila stopped to rub her knee before continuing on. When she arrived at her small apartment in an old housing block, Mila locked her bike, stepped inside, and turned on the dim yellow light. The room contained only a small bed, an old wooden table, and a photo sitting on a shelf. It was a photo of Evan Grant, her brother, smiling, holding a golden sourdough loaf. Mila stood in front of the photo, her hand trembling as she touched the cold glass. "Brother, I'm still paying off your debt. We promised we wouldn't let our recipe be lost. I haven't forgotten." Tears fell from Mila's eyes, silently, without sobs, just falling, before she quickly wiped them away with the back of her flour-streaked hand. Outside, in the dark, Owen sat in his car in the parking lot, watching the yellow light shining from her apartment window. He leaned his head against the steering wheel, eyes closed, rain tapping against the windshield, mingling with the sound of his heavy breathing. "I have to do something," he whispered. "I can't let her keep going like this." That night, it continued to rain in Denver. In a cheap hotel room near Interstate 25, Owen sat on a creaky wooden chair, the light from his laptop casting shadows across his face, reflecting in his wide, sleepless eyes. In front of him was the employee file, something Owen used to skim through in minutes, signing off without a second thought. But now, the name Myla Grant displayed in the search box weighed heavily on his heart. He flipped through every payroll sheet, every overtime request, every rejected bonus slip, every note requesting her pay be transferred to an outside account. It all pieced together into the image of a woman carrying an invisible debt. A file caught Owen's eye. Recipe proposal, Evan Grant, artisan sourdough blend. He clicked it open. A scanned document, typed text with a scrawled signature at the bottom. Evan Grant, date sent 8 years ago. Evan had sent this recipe to Harvest and Hearth, hoping the family bakery could partner with them, grow, and one day become their own small chain, but under status rejected. Owen slowly read the notes. Sourdough using a natural starter passed down 3 generations, mixed with heritage grain ratios, slow 36-hour fermentation. The words made Owen's skin prickle, because the heritage sourdough, the company's current best-selling bread, was identical. He typed quickly, searching through internal emails from 8 years ago. A name popped up: Victor Hammond, head of product development, former. Victor's draft email from that time was just one short line: new recipe. Will report to the board next week. Not a single line mentioning Evan Grant. Owen leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. He could almost hear the rain tapping against the window, mixed with his father's voice from long ago. If you build this company on something unclean, it will rot from the inside, sooner or later. Owen stood up, leaving the laptop, and walked to the window. Outside, the streetlights blurred in the rain. He pictured Evan, a young man, clutching a dream rising out of an old oven, trusting a large company with his treasured recipe, believing that goodness would be returned. Then he pictured Evan slumped over the steering wheel on a cold winter night, burdened with debt, carrying a half-burned dream, facing a slippery road sign and a fateful curve. He pictured Mila waking before dawn every day, folding dough, kneading, scrubbing floors, cleaning ovens, only to end each day with a message reading, "Your debt payment has been deducted." In that moment, Owen knew this was no longer just about a bread recipe. This was a debt the company owed a person, a family. He returned to the laptop, opening the original contract folder. The fine print in Appendix 6B appeared. The company retains the right to refuse. If the idea is used, the original author will be notified and a separate compensation agreement will be arranged. But Evan had never been notified. By dawn, Owen still hadn't slept. He called Hannah, the head of legal whom he trusted most, on a video call. On the other end, Hannah was still in her bathrobe, hair disheveled. "I thought you were on a secret vacation," Hannah grumbled. Owen sighed. "Hannah, I need you to verify something for me. 8 years ago, Evan Grant sent in a recipe. Did Victor Hammond? Did he sign it off himself without authorization? Is there any power of attorney on file?" Hannah was quiet for a moment, then nodded. I'll dig up the original files. But Owen, if this involves Victor, and if it's a breach, this isn't just plagiarism. It's intellectual property theft. Owen looked out into the dark, his voice hoarse. I know. And if it's true, I'll be the one to bring it to light. That dawn. As Owen shut his laptop, he looked out the hotel window. The rain in Denver hadn't stopped. He exhaled, whispering softly, Mila, I will return what belongs to your family. At that same moment, in her small apartment, Mila sat hugging her knees by the window, watching the rain fall, holding a photo of Evan. In her drowsiness, she could almost hear Evan's voice. Mila, don't forget, bread needs enough resting time, or the starter won't live. Mila pressed the photo against her chest, tears soaking into her old pajamas. On the table, the recipe notebook she had kept, the corners frayed, still showed the faded ink. Evan's blend. That morning, the sun finally returned to Denver after days of rain. The sky was clear, but inside Mila, the heaviness remained. She walked into the bakery with dark circles under her eyes, the old apron in her hand, her brown hair tied back neatly. When she opened the door, the scent of butter, yeast, and early coffee rushed in, bringing a moment of fragile peace. But that peace was thin, fragile like the dough that had not yet risen. At the counter, Owen was already there, still as Noah, his baseball cap hiding half his face. He gave a soft smile when he saw Mila, but his eyes were different that day, deeper, quieter, holding something resolute. During the shift, Mila still carefully folded each layer of dough, listened to the oven, watched the temperature, ensuring every croissant was perfect. But she didn't know that in the corner, Owen was quietly taking photos of the trays, logging the sales of each heritage sourdough, every best-selling item the bread made from the recipe Evan had once submitted. Near noon, when customers began to crowd in, Miguel ran up. Mila, a customer is asking if you can come out to meet them. They want to thank you. Mila shook her head, her eyes dropping down. Tell them I'm busy. Miguel sighed and turned away. Owen stood nearby, looking at Mila, and spoke softly. Are you afraid of people knowing who you are? Mila's eyes shot up, a flash of anger in them. You don't understand. Owen's voice was gentle. Then let me understand. That afternoon, Owen offered to help Mila organize the flour storage. The two of them stood there amidst the scent of flour and cardboard boxes under the flickering yellow light. Owen pulled a piece of paper from the pocket of his old jacket and handed it to Mila. It was a scanned copy of the recipe Evan had sent 8 years ago, his signature still clear, Evan Grant. Mila looked at the paper, at first confused. Then her hands began to tremble. Her breathing quickened. Her eyes widened. This is... Mila's voice cracked. It's the recipe Evan sent to the company, Owen said, looking straight at Mila. Mila shook her head, tears spilling over. They said it was rejected. Evan got the rejection letter before he... She collapsed against a sack of flour, clutching the paper so tightly it crumpled, a rough, choking sob breaking out. He died because of that debt, because he believed the company would help him, then got rejected. He thought he failed, and I've carried that debt for him for 7 years. Owen bent down, placing a hand on Mila's shoulder, his voice low. You didn't fail. Evan didn't fail. This company has been using this recipe, selling millions of loaves, never paying a cent, never mentioning his name. Mila looked up, her eyes red, tears mixing with the flour on her hands. Why are you showing me this? She whispered. Owen took a deep breath, his hand tightening. Because I can't stay silent, knowing my company owes a debt to a man who's gone, and to you. In that moment, in the flower-scented storage room, time seemed to stop. The distant oven timer kept beeping, waiting for the next batch. But Mila didn't hear it anymore. She could only see the paper, Evan's name, memories of nights they stayed up by the oven, the laughter, the dreams, and that final rainy curve on a highway. Mila sank to the floor, tears streaming down her cheeks, whispering as if to herself, Evan, you didn't fail. You didn't fail. Owen sat down next to Mila, meeting her gaze. You've carried that debt for too long. Now it's time for the company to pay. Mila shook her head, her voice tired. I don't need money. I just want him to be remembered, to be known, not to disappear as if he never existed. Owen nodded, his voice steady. Then we'll make that happen. As the evening light streamed through the glass of the storage room, falling across Mila's face, her eyes lit up with an emotion she hadn't felt in years, hope. Outside, customers were still lining up for hot croissants, laughing as they bit into the buttery pastries. But they didn't know. In that flower room, a woman who had carried a debt for 7 years, who had fallen countless nights, had just found a reason to stand up again. And they didn't know. A man, a CEO pretending to be an employee, had decided to break the silence of a system to return justice to someone who had passed, and to someone still living. The next morning, Owen no longer wore the old khaki jacket. He was back in a white shirt, a grey tie, and a simple black suit, his eyes sharp and deep. He was no longer Noah, the trainee, but the CEO of Harvest and Hearth, back in his rightful place. Mila walked into the bakery, holding a bag of flour, and stopped when she saw Owen standing at the counter, talking with the branch manager, Sarah. Owen's eyes met Mila's, and he gave a small, reassuring nod. Sarah looked flustered as Owen spoke. At 9 a.m. today, I need to hold an emergency Zoom meeting with the entire executive board, the directors, and the legal department. Sarah stammered. But sir, today. Owen interrupted, his voice calm but firm as steel. Is the day we correct a mistake from 8 years ago. At 8:55, The bakery was still open, customers lining up, the smell of fresh bread filling the air. But in the small meeting room at the back, the atmosphere was heavy. On the screen, the faces of each board member appeared: Diane, the chairwoman; Marcus, the CFO; Hannah, the head of legal; and other key members. Mila sat in the corner, wearing her old grey apron, hands clenched tightly, eyes down, her shoulders shaking slightly. In front of her was Evan's recipe, now laminated, placed neatly. Owen stood in the middle of the room, his voice low and clear. "I've called this meeting because a serious wrongdoing has been buried for 8 years. He pulled up a slide comparing Evan Grant's recipe with the current Heritage sourdough recipe. Every ratio, every detail of the fermentation process. The Heritage grain mix, it was nearly identical. The faces on the screen changed one by one. Diane frowned. "Owen, what exactly are you trying to tell us?" "I'm saying that Harvest and Hearth has been using Evan Grant's recipe, never paid any intellectual property fees, and the person paying the price was his sister, Mila Grant, who has been working in our system for 7 years, without a single day off." Mila looked up, her eyes wet, but her gaze no longer trembling. Marcus, the CFO, interjected. "We have no legal obligation here." "Owen, the rejection clause was signed." Hannah from legal cleared her throat. "The rejection clause applies if the company doesn't use the idea. But we used it." Marcus fell silent. Owen looked straight into the camera. "This is no longer just a legal issue. This is about the ethics and integrity of this company. We built Harvest and Hearth on values respecting workers, respecting the community, respecting human dignity. Yet we denied the work of a man who's gone, leaving his sister to carry the debt in silent desperation for 7 years. Diane took a deep breath. "So what are you asking for, Owen?" Owen didn't hesitate. 1, pay off Mila's remaining debt in full, including late penalties, immediately. 2, provide fair compensation to the Grant family based on the actual revenue from the Heritage sourdough line. 3, rename the bread line to Evans Heritage Sourdough to honor the true creator. 4, establish the Evan Grant Independent Bakers Support Fund, sponsored by Harvest and Hearth. The room went silent. Mila trembled, tears falling, her lips moving but no words coming out. Marcus shook his head. "Do you understand what you're saying?" "Owen, this isn't a small sum." Owen looked straight at him. "I know, but the honor of this company is worth more than any number." Diane tilted her head, her voice low. "Are you ready to take responsibility before the shareholders if revenue drops because of this?" Owen smiled slightly, his eyes resolute. "I'm ready. Because I believe a company that knows how to admit and correct its mistakes is stronger than any marketing campaign." Mila stood up, her voice hoarse but clear. "I don't want the compensation money. I just want my brother to be remembered. I just want people to know how hard he tried." Owen nodded. "And we will do that, in that moment." Sunlight streamed through the window, lighting up Mila's tousled brown hair, reflecting the tear that still shimmered on her cheek. She clutched the recipe to her chest, closed her eyes, and whispered softly, "Brother, finally, you've been seen." Diane sighed, looking at Marcus before nodding. "The board will consider it, but Owen, You will be the one taking the front line on this. Owen smiled. I'm ready. 3 days after the meeting, Harvest and Hearth prepared to launch the Heritage Sourdough at its annual event in Denver, with food journalists, bloggers, and loyal customers in attendance. Before the opening, tension filled the small room behind the stage. Owen stood in front of the mirror, adjusting his tie, his eyes reflecting determination. In his hand was Evan Grant's original recipe, laminated and placed in a formal folder. Next to him, Mila sat quietly, her hands on her lap, fingers trembling slightly, her eyes staring into space. Mila, Owen called softly. She looked up, her eyes filled with fear. I don't know if I can. Owen placed a hand on her shoulder, his eyes softening. You don't have to say anything if you're not ready. But today, Evan's name will be called. Mila lowered her head, tears filling her eyes, her lips pressing together. She took a deep breath and nodded slightly. When the stage lights came on, Owen stepped out. The guests applauded, camera flashes flickered. Before him were hundreds of faces, eager to hear about the new bread campaign. He took a deep breath, looking into the crowd, his voice ringing clear through the microphone. Today, I'm not just here to talk about a new product. I'm here to tell you a story. Owen held up Evan's recipe, his voice lowering. 8 years ago, a baker named Evan Grant sent this special sourdough recipe to Harvest and Hearth, hoping to partner with us to bring his bread to more people. He glanced down at the audience, where Mila sat, her hands clenched, her eyes glistening. But Evan never received recognition, never a single dollar, not even a thank you. He passed away, leaving behind a massive debt, and his sister spent 7 years without a single day off, working in silence to pay off that debt for him. The room fell silent. Cameras stopped flashing. A few people glanced at each other, eyes wide, some covering their mouths. Owen continued, his voice steady. We were wrong. Harvest and Hearth was wrong. We used this recipe to create a best-selling product across America without ever acknowledging Evan. He paused, looking at Mila, then at the audience. Today, we are making it right. Behind him, an image appeared of Evan smiling brightly, holding a golden sourdough loaf, the photo Mila had given Owen days before. Applause began to rise, growing louder, mixing with the shuffle of chairs, faces filled with emotion, a few journalists wiping away tears. Owen raised his hand to quiet the room, then said, Mila, Evan's sister, is here with us today. Mila stood, her legs trembling, taking slow steps to the stage. The light shone on her, her brown hair softly moving, her eyes red, but in them was something that had been missing for 7 years' pride. Owen handed her the microphone. Her hand shook so much that Owen placed his hand over hers to steady her. Mila's voice came out, weak but clear. My brother always believed that bread was a way to connect people. He used to say, good bread keeps the memories of those who once sat around the table. She paused, tears falling, but she smiled. Today, I think, his memory has been kept. Applause thundered, spreading through the hall. Some stood, others nodded. A few wiped their eyes. Owen placed a hand on Mila's shoulder, whispering, "We did it." Outside the hall, customers lined up to buy Evan's heritage sourdough, with small words beside it, "Recipe by Evan Grant, the baker who believed in hope." On each loaf, wrapped in brown paper, was Evan's quote, "Good bread not only fills the stomach, it nourishes faith." That day, social media was flooded with images of Evan, Mila's story, and their journey for justice. The hashtags, #Evans, Heritage, Harvest and Hearth, and Bakery. Justice were shared millions of times, and the video of Owen and Mila's speech spread rapidly. Mila stood looking at that sign, tears falling, but a gentle smile spreading across her lips. For the first time in 7 years, she no longer felt alone standing at the bakery counter, surrounded by the warm scent of butter, the gentle tang of yeast, and the laughter of customers around her. After the day Evan's heritage sourdough was announced, a quiet wave of change swept through Harvest and Hearth stores across the country. Inside the bakery in Denver, a photo of Evan Grant smiling hung near the window, morning sunlight shining on his kind face, his hands still holding that golden sourdough loaf, his eyes seeming to say, "Keep going." Mila. For the first time in 7 years, Mila woke up without that heavy feeling. She put on her apron and walked into the bakery, not with her head lowered anymore, but lifting her face, breathing in the scent of flour, butter, and freshly brewed coffee. Customers received their Evan's heritage sourdough, smiling, some pausing to read the quote printed on the packaging. "Good bread not only fills the belly, but nourishes the spirit." Evan Grant. Some turned to Mila, quietly saying, "Thank you. This bread made my day a little better." For the first time, Mila smiled back, a real, unforced smile. "Thank you for coming." In Owen's office, a meeting with the marketing team was underway. They presented the numbers. Sales for the Evans Heritage line had increased by 35% after the public announcement. Social media was flooded with the hashtag #EvansHeritage. Major publications like the New York Times and Food and Wine covered the story, praising Harvest and Hearth for its transparency and fairness. Owen listened to the report, nodding, but his eyes drifted to the window, where customers were lining up outside the bakery, his gaze softening. This isn't just a campaign. This is how we make things right. In Denver, that day, Mila wore a white shirt, a new apron over it, standing among a group of young people fumbling with flour, butter, and dough rollers. The Evans Fellowship Training Scholarship for Young Bakers officially launched. Young people came from everywhere, a boy who had dropped out of school, a young woman from a poor neighborhood, a middle-aged woman hoping to start over. "Miss Mila, I don't know how to fold a croissant," a flour-dusted boy said nervously. Mila smiled gently, took his hands, guiding him. "It's okay. Just feel the dough. Don't force it. Don't fear messing up, because bread is like people, it needs time to rest and grow." She looked at the boy's hands, remembering Evan's hands holding hers when he taught her how to bake, tears brimming, but she quickly wiped them away, smiling. You're doing great." When the oven beeped, signaling that the bread was ready, the smell of butter and yeast filled the kitchen, and young faces smiled, their eyes bright, clear, full of dreams. Mila stepped back, watching them, her eyes sparkling. In her heart, she heard Evan's voice. "See, Mila, young people need a place to start." That afternoon, after class, Mila stepped outside, sitting on the bakery steps, holding a cup of hot coffee, watching the sunset paint Denver's streets in gold. She was no longer the frail woman silently carrying debt alone. Now, Mila was passing on hope, continuing a legacy, and learning to live again herself. Elsewhere in Denver, Owen stepped out of his car, holding a paper bag with Evan's heritage sourdough. He stood at Mila's door, knocking softly. Mila opened the door, a bit surprised, then smiled. "You didn't have to bring me bread." Owen chuckled, raising the bag. "I know, but it's the first time I've bought sourdough knowing exactly who created it." They sat on the steps, sharing the loaf in silence. The bread was crisp, the crust thin, the inside soft and chewy, with a light tang that lingered on the tongue. Mila closed her eyes, inhaling the aroma, her voice soft. "It's been so long since I've eaten bread just to enjoy it, not to check its rise or its crust." Owen nodded. "And Evan would have wanted you to." The sunset cast a glow on Mila's hair, a breeze carrying the scent of flour, butter, and yeast through the air. Mila looked up, smiling, tears rolling down her cheeks, but this time they weren't heavy anymore. That morning, Denver was bright and clear after days of rain, light streaming through the windows of Harvest and Hearth, casting shadows of golden loaves lined up in the display case. Mila stood by the oven, her hands dusted with flour, her brown hair tied up, her face flushed with warmth. But this time, her eyes no longer carried the deep exhaustion of before. Instead, they shone with a quiet peace, a comfortable focus, like she was returning to herself. She looked at the Evans Heritage sourdough loaves coming out of the oven, each perfectly risen, their crusts crisp, a gentle tang mingling with the buttery aroma. She touched the crust lightly, listening to the crisp sound as she tapped it, the familiar sound from long ago when Evan taught her how to bake. "If the bread cracks like that, you did it right, Mila." Evan's voice echoed in her memory. Owen walked into the bakery, holding 2 cups of hot coffee. He handed one to Mila, his voice warm, ready to taste bread as a customer. Mila nodded, her eyes glowing, taking the cup, its warmth seeping into her hands. They sat at the small wooden table by the window, sunlight streaming through, lighting up the small sourdough loaf on the table, Evan's Heritage. But today, Mila wasn't eating it to check quality or adjust recipes. She broke off a piece, the light tang mingling with butter, the crust crisp, melting on her tongue, her eyes closing, tears falling. But this time, the tears weren't bitter, but sweet like the bread, warm like the morning sun. "It still tastes as good as when he was here," Mila whispered. Owen looked at her, smiling softly. "He's still here, Mila, in this bread, in this story, in everyone finding hope through Evan and you." Outside the bakery, a long line of people waited for bread, Among them, a middle-aged man holding a loaf stood silently, looking at the sign that read, "Home of Evan's Heritage." He turned to his son, saying, "Son, do you know? The person who created this bread once believed that a single loaf could change a life." The boy looked up, asking, "Can I do that too, Dad?" The man smiled, ruffling his son's hair. "As long as you don't give up." That day, Harvest and Hearth stores nationwide put up signs for Evan's Heritage Day. Each loaf sold would contribute to the fund supporting young bakers starting out. The story of Evan and Mila appeared in the news and across social media, not as a marketing campaign, but as a seed of faith planted in people's hearts. As the sunset fell, Mila left the bakery, walking slowly through streets bathed in golden light, not carrying bread bags, not thinking of payroll, no longer weighed down by debt. She stood on a bridge, looking over the shimmering Platte River, the breeze lifting strands of her hair, her eyes looking into the distance, a small smile on her lips. "I have lived, I have loved, I have believed, and I have forgiven. Thank you, Evan, for teaching me that some debts aren't meant to be repaid, but to be released so we can live on." Above, birds flew across the sky, free and at peace. The oven at the bakery kept beeping. Young bakers' laughter echoed. The scent of bread filled the streets. Evan was gone, but his story, his recipe, and his dream lived on.